They called me the woman who kept house for 36 years. What they didn't know was that while they slept, I built an empire worth $240 million under a name they'd long forgotten. The name I carried before I became Mrs. Morrison. I'm Eleanor Catherine Morrison, 58 years old, and this morning, I sat in the law offices of Morrison and Associates, a firm bearing my husband's family name, listening to my 35-year-old son explain why I was no longer necessary. William stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Hartford, his back to me, hands clasped behind his navy suit jacket. The October light cut sharp angles across the mahogany conference table between us. His wife Claire sat to my left, manicured fingers drumming against a leather portfolio. Her perfume, something expensive and aggressive, filling the space where words should have been. My boy didn't turn around when he spoke. "Mom, you're 58. The firm needs fresh energy. Claire and I have been discussing this for months, and we think it's time you step back. Enjoy retirement. You've earned it." The words landed soft, practiced. I'd heard him rehearse versions of this speech on phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. Late nights when he assumed I was asleep in the guest room of what used to be my home. Claire leaned forward, her smile tight and symmetrical. "We'll take care of you, of course. The Connecticut house. You can stay there as long as you need. Though legally, the deed transferred to William's name last year. Just a formality, really. Estate planning." The air in the room tasted like old leather and lies. I watched my son's reflection in the window glass, watched the way his jaw worked like his father's when Robert tried to justify something indefensible, watched the slight tilt of Claire's head, the practiced empathy that never quite reached her eyes. I thought about the girl I used to be, 22 years old, standing in a different office. MIT diploma still crisp in its frame, a job offer from Preston and Vale Investment in my hands. I thought about the night I met Robert Morrison at a charity gala in Boston. How his confidence had seemed like strength back then. How his certainty about the world had felt like safety. I thought about the first time I heard him tell a colleague that his wife didn't understand business. The memory surfaced clean and sharp. I was 27, pregnant with Sophie, standing in the doorway of our Beacon Hill apartment. Robert on the phone laughing. "You. Eleanor, no, she's not involved in the firm. She's focused on the home. The real estate ideas, those came from our market analysis team. She's sweet, but business isn't really her domain." I'd backed away from that doorway quietly, one hand on my swelling belly, and walked to the bathroom where I locked the door and stared at my reflection for 15 minutes. Not crying, just looking, trying to recognize the woman who'd let herself become invisible. That night, after Robert fell asleep, I'd taken out my old MIT notebooks, spread them across the kitchen table in the blue glow of the refrigerator light, started sketching property values, market trends, investment timelines, started planning something I couldn't yet name. But that was then. Now, 31 years later, I sat in this conference room watching my son dismiss me with the same casual certainty his father had perfected, the same assumption that I was something to be managed, maintained, eventually discarded when I stopped being convenient. I set my purse on this table, brown leather, worn at the corners. Inside it sat 3 things they didn't know existed. A business card for Marcus Chen, the attorney who'd handled my private affairs for 26 years. A USB drive containing documentation they'd never seen. And a single key to an office in downtown Boston they didn't know I owned. "When did you transfer the house deed?" I kept my voice level, curious, not accusatory. Never raise your voice when you're gathering information. Robert taught me that, ironically, during one of his lectures about negotiation tactics, he thought I wasn't smart enough to apply. William finally turned. His face, so much like his father's, down to the slight asymmetry of his left eyebrow, showed surprise that I'd asked. "Last November. Dad handled it. Standard estate planning, like Claire said. You signed the papers." "I signed papers transferring ownership of my home to you without being told what they were?" Claire's smile widened a fraction, sharp as cut glass. "The house was always going to William eventually. This just streamlines things. And you're not losing anything. You still live there. Until you decide I don't." The words came out softer than I'd intended. Not weak, just factual. The temperature in the room shifted. William glanced at Claire. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind married people develop when they've spent too long finishing each other's cruelties. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're not kicking you out. We're protecting the family assets." Family assets. As if I hadn't contributed anything to the Morrison fortune. As if 36 years of being the perfect wife, the gracious hostess, the invisible support system counted for nothing. I stood, smoothed my skirt, navy blue, conservative, the kind of outfit that made me disappear in rooms full of people who thought they mattered more than I did. I'd like copies of all the paperwork, everything I've signed in the last 5 years. William's expression shifted to irritation. Why? You don't need to worry about the legal details. That's what we're here for. I'm sure, but I'd still like copies. Claire's drumming fingers stopped. For the first time since I'd entered the room, she looked at me, really looked, and something like concern flickered behind her practiced composure. Mrs. Morrison, is there a problem? William and I have worked very hard to make sure you're taken care of. I'm sure you have. I picked up my purse. The weight of it felt different than it had an hour ago. Heavier, more solid, like all the years of silence had condensed into something I could finally hold. I'll be in touch about those documents. I left before they could respond. Walked through the glass doors of Morrison & Associates, past the receptionist who'd been hired 6 months ago and still didn't know my first name. Down the elevator that smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. Outside, October in Connecticut bit cold against my face. The sidewalk stretched empty in both directions, afternoon light turning the buildings bronze. My car sat 3 blocks away in a public lot because I didn't have parking privileges at my own husband's firm. Never had. Small indignity. Easy to overlook. 1 of 1,000. I didn't walk to my car. Instead, I turned left, toward the Starbucks on the corner. Ordered a coffee I didn't want. Sat by the window with my phone, and finally made the call I'd been preparing for without knowing it. Marcus Chen answered on the second ring. Eleanor, I was wondering when you'd call. His voice carried the warmth of old friendship, the kind built over decades of quiet trust. We'd met at MIT, him in law, me in architecture and real estate investment. He'd been the one who helped me incorporate Ashford Property Holdings ELLC 26 years ago, who'd never once asked why I needed a business completely separate from my husband's knowledge. It's time, I said. I've had the divorce papers ready for 3 years, been updating them quarterly just in case. Despite everything, I smiled. Marcus had always been practical about impossible things. Not just divorce. I need you to pull all the documentation on Ashford Holdings. Client lists, property values, partnership agreements, everything. I'm gonna need it very soon. A pause. I heard him typing. Current valuation? Last assessment was $238 million. Probably closer to $240 now with the Newport properties. Jesus, Eleanor. I know. Do they have any idea? None. And you want to tell them? I watched the street outside. A young woman walked past, phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something. Probably 25, probably just starting out, probably being told by someone that she needed to choose between career and family, between being seen and being safe. I want to show them, I said. There's a difference. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, this is going to get ugly. It's been ugly for 36 years. I've just been very polite about it. We talked for another 20 minutes. Logistics, timelines, the legal architecture of unraveling a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but had rotted from within. When I hung up, my coffee had gone cold, and the sky outside had shifted to that particular shade of autumn gray that makes everything look like a memory. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to the office I kept in Boston, the one in the building I'd purchased 12 years ago with profits from early property flips. It sat on the 4th floor of a renovated textile factory in the South End, all exposed brick and tall windows. No nameplate on the door. Just 4C. Anonymous. Safe. Inside, the space was exactly as I'd left it 3 days ago. Desk with 2 monitors, filing cabinets along the back wall, a small kitchenette, and a leather couch I'd bought at an estate sale. On the wall above my desk hung a single photograph. Me at 22, fresh out of MIT, wearing a blazer that was too big and a smile that still believed the world rewarded competence and intelligence equally. I booted up my computer and started pulling files. 26 years of work, silent accumulation, strategic patience. The first property had been almost accidental. I'd been 32, 10 years into marriage, starting to understand that Robert would never see me as an equal partner. My grandmother had died and left me $50,000. Money that went into an account Robert didn't know existed because it predated our marriage, and I'd never mentioned it. I'd used that money to buy a rundown duplex in Springfield, Massachusetts. Spent 6 months doing research at night after everyone slept, learning about renovation costs and rental markets. Hired contractors during the day when Robert thought I was at book club. Flipped it for $84,000. The profit felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. I'd bought 2 more properties the next year, then 4. Each investment carefully researched, meticulously managed, each transaction building on the last. The money grew, the portfolio expanded, and every single document was filed under Ashford. My maiden name, the identity I'd set aside when I became Mrs. Morrison. By the time I was 40, I owned 8 properties worth a combined $4 million. By 50, I'd formed investment partnerships with 12 silent backers and owned stakes in commercial real estate across New England, worth $48 million. By 55, I'd acquired 3 boutique hotels and significant holdings in downtown Boston, worth $130 million. Now at 58, I sat looking at spreadsheets that represented $240 million in assets, properties, investments, partnerships, an entire empire built in the margins of a life everyone thought was small. My phone buzzed. Text from Sophie, my daughter. "Mom, William just called, said you were upset about estate planning stuff. Are you okay?" I stared at the message. Sophie, 33 years old, smart, kind, still trying to keep peace in a family that had never actually been peaceful, just quiet about its cruelties. I typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart, just some details to sort out. How are the girls?" Normal, maternal, the kind of response that wouldn't trigger alarm bells. Her reply came fast. "They're good. Can we talk tomorrow? I'm worried." "Of course, love you." I set the phone down and returned to my files. There would be time to talk to Sophie, time to explain. But not yet. Not until I'd built the framework that would make explanation possible. Around midnight, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were printed records from the early days of Robert's firm. Documents I'd kept because something in me had known, even then, that I'd need evidence of what I'd contributed. There were notes in my handwriting, market analyses, investment strategies, the entire blueprint for Morrison & Associates' expansion into real estate law, written during late nights while Robert slept, and I pretended I was just a wife with insomnia. I found the memo I'd written in 1998, outlining why the firm should target commercial real estate clients in the Boston metro area. Found my research on property law changes. Found the list of potential clients I'd compiled from my MIT network. People who'd gone on to develop some of the most valuable properties in New England. Robert had presented all of it as his own strategic vision, had built his reputation on insights I'd handed him, and he'd claimed without attribution. I made copies of everything, scanned them, uploaded them to cloud storage with timestamps and metadata, built a paper trail of intellectual theft that had been invisible for decades. By 2 a.m, my eyes burned and my back ached from sitting. But the documentation was complete, irrefutable. The kind of evidence that wouldn't just win a divorce case, it would rewrite the narrative of who had built what. I drove home as the sky started to lighten. The Connecticut house sat at the end of a long driveway, all colonial symmetry and expensive landscaping, lights off. Robert's car in the garage. Everything quiet. I let myself in through the side door, moving through the mudroom where I'd hung thousands of coats, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, the hallway where family photos documented a life that looked enviable and felt like slow erasure. Robert's study door was cracked open. I could hear him snoring, that particular rasp that had gotten worse over the years. He'd be 60 in 2 months. We'd been planning a party, catered a fair, 200 guests, all the usual people who knew us as a unit, never as individuals. I wondered if they'd be surprised when they learned the truth. Probably not. Most people don't notice the architecture of other people's marriages. They just accept the facade. In my own room, we'd had separate bedrooms for 5 years now, another small indignity neither of us acknowledged. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel the day's weight. Not crying, just breathing, letting the rage and grief and strange exhilaration mix into something I could carry. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, even at this hour. Preliminary timeline. We can have divorce papers served within 2 weeks if you want to move fast. Property division will be complex but winnable given your separate holdings. I'm assuming you want to go scorched earth?" I typed back, "Not scorched earth, surgical precision. I want them to understand exactly what they lost." Even better. I set the phone aside and lay back, fully clothed, watching shadows move across the ceiling. 36 years. That's how long I'd been married. That's how long I'd been someone's wife before I was anyone's self. The girl in that MIT graduation photo wouldn't recognize me now. But maybe that was okay. Maybe becoming someone unrecognizable to your younger self wasn't always tragedy. Sometimes it was strategy. Sometimes you had to disappear completely before you could rebuild as someone they couldn't dismiss. Sleep came in fragments. I dreamed about buildings, the ones I owned, the ones I'd sold, the ones I'd watched go up from foundation to roofline. In the dreams, they all had my name on them. Not Morrison, Ashford. The name I'd been born with, the name I'd hidden for decades while I built something no one could take away. When I woke, sunlight cut sharp through the curtains and Robert was knocking on my door. "Eleanor, you awake? I made coffee." His voice carried that particular tone of husbandly consideration that appeared when he wanted something. I recognized it the way you recognize a commercial jingle. Annoying, familiar, impossible to forget. I opened the door. He stood there in his weekend casual, khakis and a polo shirt, salt and pepper hair still damp from the shower. Handsome, even now. That had never been the problem. "Thought we could talk about William's plans for the firm," he said, already turning back toward the kitchen, assuming I'd follow. I did follow. Not because he expected it, but because this conversation would happen eventually, and I wanted it on my terms. In the kitchen, Robert had indeed made coffee. Also toast. Fruit. The kind of breakfast he prepared twice a year when he wanted to remind me he was capable of domestic participation without actually participating in domestic life. He poured 2 mugs, added cream to mine without asking if I still took it that way. I did. Some habits outlived their usefulness, but persisted anyway. "William called last night, said you seemed upset about the estate planning." Robert sat across from me at the breakfast nook. That studied casual posture that was supposed to signal openness, but really just signaled he'd already decided how this conversation would go. "I wasn't upset, I was clarifying." "Eleanor, come on. You know William's just trying to protect the family assets. The house transfer is standard procedure. My attorney recommended it years ago." "Your attorney?" "Our attorney." "We don't have our attorney, Robert. We have your attorney, who sometimes answers questions I have about wills." He blinked, surprised, maybe, that I'd drawn that distinction. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Not quite guilt, but close, adjacent to it. The way people look when they're confronted with small cruelties they've been committing so long, they forgot they were cruelties at all. "Is this about feeling left out? Because if you want to be more involved in the firm—" "I don't want to be involved in the firm." Relief washed over his face. Quick. Obvious. He'd been prepared to offer me a token position, something with a title and no actual power. Now he didn't have to. Good. So what's the problem?" I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch, watched him start to fidget, that barely perceptible shift that meant he was getting impatient. Robert had never been comfortable with silence. He filled empty air the way some people filled empty stomachs, compulsively, without thought. "I'd like copies of everything I've signed in the last 10 years. Property deeds, contracts, legal documents, all of it." His expression closed, that easy weekend warmth evaporating into something harder. "Why?" "Because I signed them." "Eleanor, what is this really about? Are you angry about something?" The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Angry about something. As if anger could be contained in a single something, rather than 36 years of accumulated anythings. "I'm not angry. I'm curious about paperwork that has my signature on it." "You don't need to worry about legal details. That's what I do. That's what William does." "I'd still like copies." We stared at each other across the breakfast table. The toast sat untouched between us, getting cold. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Normal Sunday morning sounds, the kind of domestic peace people thought we had. "I'll have them sent over." Robert's voice had gone formal, the way it did in depositions. "Cushus, is there anything else?" "Not right now." He stood, taking his coffee mug to the sink, rinsing it with more attention than the task required. When he spoke again, his back was to me. "I know things haven't been perfect, Eleanor. I know I work too much, and maybe I don't always appreciate everything you do. But we've built a good life. 36 years. That counts for something." It did count for something, just not what he thought. I didn't respond. After a moment, he left the kitchen. I heard him climb the stairs to his study. heard the door close with that solid click that meant do not disturb. I sat alone in our kitchen, in the house I'd made beautiful, in the life I'd made bearable, and felt nothing that resembled sadness, only a strange building pressure, like water rising behind a dam, like something that had been held back so long it had forgotten how to flow and had learned instead to gather force. My phone buzzed, text from Sophie again. "Mom, can I come over? I really want to talk." I looked at the message for a long time. Sophie, my daughter, who'd grown up watching me disappear, watching me become smaller and smaller, until I was just a helpful presence in the background of other people's important lives. What would I tell her? That her father had spent decades treating me like a pleasant inconvenience? That her brother had learned his father's casual cruelty so well he could dismiss his own mother with perfect technique? Or would I tell her the truth? That I'd spent 26 years building something they couldn't diminish or define? That while they all slept soundly in their certainty of how the world worked, I'd been awake, calculating, acquiring, becoming someone they'd never looked closely enough to see? I typed back, "Come for lunch, just us. I'll make that pasta you like." Her response came immediately. "Perfect. Love you, Mom." I set the phone down and looked at the kitchen around me, at the copper pots I'd chosen, at the tile backsplash I'd designed, at the herb garden visible through the window that I'd planted and maintained for 16 years. All of it mine in the only way that didn't legally matter. 3 hours later, Sophie's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she got out, phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something. She wore jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. 33 years old, beautiful in that unconscious way young women are before they learn to see themselves through other people's assessments. She hung up as she reached the door, her expression shifting to concern when she saw me. "Mom, hi." She hugged me, that full-body embrace she'd given since childhood. "How are you really?" We moved to the kitchen. I'd made fresh pasta, just like I'd promised. The kind of cooking I'd perfected because it was expected, then continued because it was the one thing I did that no one questioned or diminished. At least they'd always appreciated my food. "I'm fine, sweetheart, really." Sophie sat at the counter, watching me drain pasta with the careful attention she'd inherited from me. The ability to read subtext, to notice what wasn't being said. "William called me yesterday, said you were acting strange at the firm meeting, and Dad texted this morning saying you were upset about paperwork." "I'm not upset. I'm clarifying my legal position." "What does that mean?" I plated the pasta, added the sauce I'd been simmering for 2 hours, set her plate in front of her with a fork and napkin, the small domestic choreography I could perform without thought. "It means I want to understand what I've signed." Sophie took a bite, made an appreciative sound, then set her fork down. "Mom, can you just tell me what's going on? Is something wrong between you and Dad?" The question hung there, genuine and concerned. Sophie had always been the emotional center of our family, the one who tried to hold everything together, who felt responsible for everyone's happiness. I'd done that to her, taught her through example that women fix things by absorbing impact, by making themselves smaller so others could feel bigger. "What do you know about the house deed transfer?" Her expression shifted. Confusion, then something else. Knowledge she didn't want to admit having. "William mentioned something about estate planning, that you'd signed papers last year. Did you know the house is now in his name? That I no longer own the home I've lived in for 30 years? Sophie's face went pale. No, I didn't know that. I thought it was still in your and Dad's names." "So did I." "But that's..." She trailed off, searching for a word that wasn't betrayal. "That's not right. That's your house. You've taken care of it. Everything here is you. Legally, it's William's now. I can stay here as long as I need," which is another way of saying as long as they allow it. Sophie pushed her plate away, appetite apparently gone. "Mom, what the hell? Did Dad explain this to you?" "He says it's standard estate planning, that I don't need to worry about legal details." "That's bullshit." The profanity surprised us both. Sophie rarely swore. She covered her mouth, laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Sorry, but it is. This is bullshit. You've been married for 36 years. You've raised us. You've supported Dad's career. You've been perfect in every possible way, and they're just, what, writing you out of your own life?" I reached across the counter, took her hand. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not tell anyone else. Not yet. Can you do that?" She nodded, suddenly very still. "I have money." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have substantial financial assets that are separate from your father, that no one in this family knows about." Sophie's eyes widened. How much? Enough that being written out of the Morrison estate doesn't threaten my financial security. Enough that I've been building something else entirely for most of my adult life. Mom, how much? I met her eyes, watched her process what I was about to say. $240 million. The number sat between us like a third presence. Sophie's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? I've owned a property investment company for 26 years, under my maiden name. It's been completely separate from this family's finances. 200? She couldn't finish the sentence. How is that possible? How did we not know? Because I did it quietly. At night, during the day while you were all at school and your father was at work. I did it in every spare moment that was supposedly mine to waste. Sophie stood up, walked to the window, turned back. Does Dad know? No. Does William? No. My God, Mom, I don't even know what this is. I stood too, moved to stand beside her. This is what happens when you assume someone is invisible long enough that you stop looking for them. This is what happens when you mistake silence for absence. Sophie turned to me, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw something new in her expression. Not just concern, recognition. The dawning understanding of who I actually was beneath the role she'd always known. What are you going to do? I'm going to leave your father. I'm going to file for divorce. And I'm going to make sure everyone understands exactly what they failed to notice for 36 years. When? Soon. She absorbed this, nodded slowly. Do you need help? I need you to trust me. And I need you to know that whatever happens next isn't about punishing anyone. It's about standing up after kneeling for so long I forgot what my full height felt like. Sophie hugged me then, hard and fierce. I'm proud of you, Mom. I didn't know I needed to be, but I am. We stood there in my kitchen, William's kitchen, legally, holding each other while the afternoon light shifted and the pasta went cold. Outside, the world continued being normal. Inside, everything had already changed. It just hadn't shown itself yet. When Sophie left an hour later, I sat alone again and opened my laptop, pulled up the file Marcus had prepared. Divorce papers, property settlements, the legal architecture of undoing a marriage. At the bottom of the document sat a single line, waiting for my signature. I picked up a pen, held it over the paper. Thought about the girl I'd been at 22. Thought about all the years between then and now. Thought about what that girl would say if she could see this moment. She'd probably tell me I should have done this 20 years ago. But I was never good at taking advice, even from my younger self. I preferred to build things so slowly and carefully that by the time anyone noticed, it was already too late to stop. I signed my name, Eleanor Catherine Ashford Morrison, all of it. The girl I'd been, the woman I'd become, the person I'd been building in secret while everyone else was busy not noticing. Tomorrow I'd call Marcus. We'd start the formal process, serve papers, begin dismantling the legal fiction that was our marriage. But tonight, I sat in the house that wasn't mine anymore and felt more at home than I had in 36 years. Because home isn't walls and windows. It's knowing who you are when no one's watching. It's the person you build when everyone assumes you're building nothing at all. Outside, darkness gathered. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat in the growing shadows, watching the numbers on my computer screen, 240 million reasons I'd never need anyone's permission again. They thought silence meant absence. They were about to learn what it actually meant. Accumulation, strategy, power dressed in patience, waiting for exactly the right moment to stand up and be counted. That moment was coming. Soon. Marcus called 3 days later with news that the preliminary filings were complete. I met him at a cafe in Cambridge, one of those places near MIT where we used to study together decades ago. The irony of returning to the beginning while orchestrating an ending wasn't lost on either of us. He slid a manila folder across the table. Divorce petition filed this morning. Robert will be served at his office tomorrow at 2 p.m. I scheduled it for maximum professional embarrassment. I opened the folder. Page after page of legal documentation, each one a small dismantling of the life I'd built around myself like a cage I'd learned to call home. The property division is going to be interesting. Everything you own through Ashford Holdings is legally separate. Premarital in origin, maintained separately throughout the marriage. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, but since you can prove complete financial separation, he has no claim. Marcus pulled out a second folder, this one thicker. This is where it gets beautiful. I cross-referenced Morrison & Associates client list with your Ashford Holdings tenant roster. 63% overlap. More than half his major clients are either leasing from you or doing business in buildings you own. The numbers sat there, undeniable. I'd been the foundation of Robert's empire without him ever knowing the ground beneath him had my name on it. There's more. I pulled the incorporation documents for Morrison & Associates. Did you know you're listed as a founding consultant? 1992. Your signature is on the original LLC paperwork. I didn't know. Or I'd known once and forgotten, filed it away in the category of things that didn't matter because no one else would acknowledge they mattered. What does that mean legally? It means you have standing to claim intellectual property contribution. All those market analyses you did, all those client introductions, they weren't wifely favors. They were professional consulting that was never compensated. Marcus leaned back, a small smile playing at his lips. Eleanor, you didn't just build your own empire. You built his too. And now we get to make sure everyone knows it. I sipped coffee that had gone lukewarm. Outside, students hurried past with backpacks and determination, heading toward futures they thought they controlled. I remembered being that certain, that young, that unaware of how easily certainty could be weaponized against you. When do we tell them about Ashford Holdings? I recommend waiting until the first settlement meeting. Let Robert come in thinking he's negotiating from strength. Let William think he's protecting family assets. Then we show them exactly what family assets actually exist. And the client list overlap? That's leverage. If this goes to court, we introduce evidence that Morrison & Associates' success is built substantially on your unpaid consulting and your property holdings. It won't just embarrass him professionally. It'll tank the firm's credibility. The thought should have brought satisfaction. Instead, I felt that strange flatness again. Not quite numbness. More like the calm that comes after you've carried something heavy for so long, that setting it down feels like floating. There's something else you should know. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled, turned the screen toward me. William's been making calls, trying to find out if you have separate assets. He contacted 3 banks yesterday. My son. Already moving into damage control mode, probably at Robert's direction. Already assuming I was the problem to be solved rather than the person they'd failed to see. Let him look. He won't find anything under Morrison, and he doesn't know about Ashford. Yet. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, the kind old friends can share when words become optional. When we stood to leave, Marcus touched my arm. Eleanor, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Divorce at 58, exposing everything, it's going to change your life completely. My life already changed. 36 years ago when I became someone's wife instead of someone's equal. I'm just finally admitting it out loud. He nodded, satisfied. We parted outside the cafe, him heading toward his office in the financial district, me walking toward the MIT campus where I'd once believed intelligence and hard work were enough to guarantee respect. I found myself standing in front of the building where I'd attended my first real estate investment class. The architecture was the same, that deliberate ugliness of 1960s institutional design, but everything else had shifted. There were more women now, I noticed. More students who looked like the future might actually have space for them. A young woman passed me, maybe 22, wearing an MIT engineering sweatshirt. She was on the phone, her voice carrying. No, Mom, I'm not changing my major just because Dad thinks engineering is too hard for me. I'm top of my class. She disappeared into the building. I wondered if she knew how lucky she was to have that fight now, instead of 30 years from now when the cost of being right would be so much higher. My phone buzzed. Sophie. Mom, can we talk? William called me this morning. He's asking weird questions about your finances. I texted back, come to Boston tonight. There's something I need to show you. 3 hours later, Sophie stood in my office at 4C, staring at the monitors displaying Ashford Holdings' portfolio. This is really all yours? Every property, every investment, every dollar. She walked along the wall where I'd hung photographs of each major acquisition. The Springfield duplex, the first Boston office building, the Newport Hotel. 26 years of growth documented in glossy prints that looked like someone else's success story. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because telling you would have meant telling your father. And the moment he knew, it would have stopped being mine and started being something he could manage. Control, eventually claim. Sophie turned from the photographs, her expression somewhere between awe and anger. You didn't trust us. I didn't trust the system we lived in. There's a difference. She sat in my desk chair, spinning slowly to take in the whole space. William's panicking. He called me twice today. Apparently, Dad got some kind of legal notice, and now they're both freaking out about Eleanor's behavior. They were served divorce papers this afternoon. Sophie stopped spinning. You're divorcing Dad. Yes. Because of the house thing? Because of 36 years of house things. The deed transfer was just the first time they bothered to do it legally instead of just assuming I'd accept it. Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, silenced it. William again. He wants to know if you've been acting strange lately. She looked up at me. What should I tell him? Tell him I've been acting exactly like myself. He's just never paid enough attention to know what that looks like. She smiled at that, sharp and quick. Then the smile faded. Mom, this is going to get ugly. You know that, right? Dad's not going to just accept this. And William, he's going to feel betrayed. I know. Are you ready for that? I thought about the question. Was I ready for my husband to be angry? My son to feel deceived? For the careful peace I'd maintained for decades to shatter into something I couldn't control? I've been ready since I was 32 years old. I just didn't know it yet. Sophie left after midnight, taking with her a USB drive containing copies of all the Ashford Holdings documentation. Insurance, she called it. Evidence that her mother wasn't crazy or vindictive, but methodical and justified. I stayed in the office, too wired to sleep. Pulled up financial projections for the next quarter, reviewed rental agreements coming up for renewal, did all the normal work of managing a multi-million-dollar enterprise, except now the secret that had protected this work was about to become public knowledge. My phone rang at 1 a.m. Robert. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message he left. Eleanor, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but we need to talk. Immediately. This divorce nonsense. We can work this out like adults. Call me back. His voice carried that tone of strained patience, the one he used when he thought I was being irrational, but he was willing to be the bigger person and explain reality to me. I deleted the message. The next call came at 7 a.m. I was back home in Connecticut, making coffee in the kitchen that legally belonged to William. Robert appeared in the doorway still in his pajamas, phone in hand. You're not answering my calls. I heard the message. And I have nothing to say to you that isn't already in the legal filings. He moved into the kitchen, that particular way he had of occupying space, shoulders back, chin up, every movement a small assertion of authority. Eleanor, this is ridiculous. You're upset about the house. Fine, we can discuss it. But divorce? After 36 years? 36 years is exactly why I'm divorcing you. What does that even mean? I poured coffee, added cream, turned to face him. It means I'm tired of being managed, maintained, gradually written out of my own life by people who think I should be grateful for the diminishment. Jesus Christ, Eleanor, no one's diminishing you. You have a beautiful home that I don't own. You have financial security that you control. You have a family that loves you, that treats me like furniture, pleasant, useful, easily rearranged to suit everyone else's comfort. Robert set his phone down on the counter with deliberate care. Is this about money? Because if you need your own account, we can set something up. Give you an allowance. An allowance. The word hung between us. He heard it too late, the way it sounded. Like I was a child to be managed with pocket money. You know what I mean, your own funds, for whatever you need. I don't need funds from you, Robert. I have my own money. What, your inheritance? Eleanor, your grandmother left you $50,000 26 years ago. That's hardly... I have $240 million in assets, all separate from our marriage, all legally mine. The kitchen went silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Robert stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, complete, uncomprehending shock. What are you talking about? I own Ashford Property Holdings LLC, have owned it for 26 years. Current valuation is just over $240 million. That's not possible, I would know. Our accountant would... Your accountant. Who works for you? Who never asked if I had separate holdings because why would he? I'm just the wife. Robert pulled out a chair, sat heavily. His face had gone pale. You're saying you've had a secret company for 26 years? Not secret, separate. There's a difference. How? How is that even possible? Night work, day work while you were at the office. Every spare moment you assumed I was wasting. I built something you never bothered to look for because you never imagined I could. He shook his head, that gesture he used when facing information that didn't fit his worldview. This is insane. You're telling me that while I was building Morrison and Associates, you were, what, playing real estate mogul? I wasn't playing anything. I was doing exactly what you were doing. Except I did it without claiming credit for other people's work. That landed. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? It means every market analysis you presented as your own strategic insight came from research I did. Every client you courted came from introductions I made. You built your reputation on my invisible labor and called it your own genius. That's not, Eleanor, you helped with some research, but the firm's success, 63% of your major clients lease space in buildings I own. Your entire firm is quite literally built on my foundation. You just never knew whose name was on the deed. Robert stood, paced to the window back. I don't believe this. You're making this up. Some kind of revenge fantasy. Marcus Chen has all the documentation. He'll be happy to show you the incorporation papers, the property deeds, the financial statements. All of it legal, separate, and completely beyond your reach. Marcus Chen, your college friend? You've been conspiring with him. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. Robert turned to face me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something that looked like fear. What do you want? Is this about negotiating a better settlement? Because we can work something out. I don't want your money, Robert. I have my own. I want you to understand that every assumption you've made about me for 36 years was wrong. That's all. Just recognition of who I actually am versus who you decided I was. His phone rang. He glanced at it, William, and sent it to voicemail. The kids are going to be devastated. Sophie knows. She's handling it. And William? Will learn that his mother is not someone to be dismissed. Robert's face hardened then, shock crystallizing into anger. This is about the house transfer. You're throwing away our entire marriage because of paperwork. No. I'm ending our marriage because you've spent 36 years treating me like an accessory to your life instead of a person with my own. The house transfer was just the moment I stopped pretending it was acceptable. Eleanor, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You're just not used to my reason mattering. I left him standing in the kitchen and walked upstairs to pack. Not everything, just enough for the week. My real belongings, the things that actually mattered, were already at the Boston office or in storage units he'd never known existed. The bedroom I'd slept in for 5 years looked different now. Less like a retreat and more like a waiting room. Everything temporary, everything someone else's property I'd been borrowing. I heard Robert's voice downstairs. On the phone now, probably with William. Probably strategizing how to handle this. How to contain the damage of a wife who'd stopped cooperating with her own erasure. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Robert just called his attorney. They want an emergency meeting. Should I agree? I typed back. Agree, but tell them I won't be attending. They can talk to you. His response came fast. This is going to make him furious. Good. He's been comfortable for 36 years. Time he experienced something else. I finished packing and carried my suitcase downstairs. Robert intercepted me in the hallway. Where are you going? Boston, I have work to do. Work? Eleanor, you can't just leave in the middle of this. Watch me. I moved past him toward the door. He grabbed my arm. Not hard, just enough to stop me. That assumption of the right to physically redirect my movement. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. Let go. Something in my voice made him release immediately. I saw the shock register again. Not at what I'd said, but at the tone. The absolute flatness that came from being done with negotiation. Eleanor, please, can we just talk about this like rational people? We are talking. You just don't like what I'm saying. I don't understand why you're doing this. If you have money, if you have your own business, why hide it? Why lie to me for 26 years? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. The same way you don't tell me about every client meeting or business decision. Except you call that privacy when you do it, and deception when I do. That's different. My work is how I support this family. My work is how I support myself. Because I learned a long time ago that your support comes with conditions I'm no longer willing to accept. I picked up my suitcase and walked out. Behind me, Robert called my name twice. I didn't turn around. The drive to Boston took 90 minutes. Traffic heavy with morning commuters, all of us heading somewhere that mattered more than where we'd been. I listened to NPR discuss market trends and political scandals, the voice of the world continuing while mine imploded and rebuilt simultaneously. At the office, I found Diana Foster already waiting. My CFO for 18 years. The woman who'd helped me structure every major deal while maintaining absolute discretion. She stood when I entered, her expression concerned. Marcus called, said things are moving faster than expected. Robert knows, about Ashford Holdings, about the money. Diana nodded slowly. How'd he take it? like someone who just discovered the ground beneath him was never solid. Good. He should be destabilized. Makes him easier to negotiate with. We spent the morning reviewing strategy. Diana had prepared financial projections, showing that even if Robert somehow claimed marital property rights, which he couldn't legally, I'd still retain over 90% of my holdings. The prenuptial agreement I'd insisted on 26 years ago, the one Robert had barely read because he assumed it protected him, had language about separate business enterprises that would protect everything I'd built. The beautiful thing, Diana said, pulling up a spreadsheet, is that even if he tries to claim you used marital funds to start Ashford Holdings, we have documentation proving every dollar came from your inheritance, and every subsequent dollar came from returns on that initial investment. He contributed nothing, not money, not labor, not even knowledge of its existence. What about intellectual property? Could he claim that conversations we had contributed to my business strategy? Only if he could prove specific documented contributions. Did he ever review your business plans, sign off on acquisitions? He didn't know they existed. Then no, you can't claim credit for influencing something you didn't know was happening. My phone buzzed. William this time. Mom, please call me. Dad is losing his mind and I need to understand what's happening. I showed the message to Diana. She grimaced. You going to call him back? Eventually, when I'm ready to have that conversation on my terms instead of his. Instead, I texted Sophie. How are you holding up? Her response came quickly. William won't stop calling. He wants me to talk sense into you. I told him you're making perfect sense. He's just not listening. He did not appreciate that. I smiled despite everything. 3 days passed. I stayed in Boston, living in a small apartment I kept above the office. 2 bedrooms, minimal furniture, the kind of space designed for function rather than performance. No one knew about this apartment either. It was another piece of the parallel life I'd been constructing for decades. Marcus called with updates. Robert had hired 3 attorneys. They were demanding full financial disclosure, threatening to freeze assets, making noise about fraud and deception. Let them make noise, Marcus said. Everything you did was legal, and the more they investigate, the more they'll discover how thoroughly you've protected yourself. On the 4th day, William showed up at my office. I don't know how he found the address. Maybe Sophie told him. Maybe he hired someone to follow me. But there he was, standing in my doorway looking like Robert had 30 years ago. Certain, slightly aggressive, ready to explain reality to the confused woman who clearly didn't understand her own situation. Mom, we need to talk. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, taking in the office with visible surprise. The photographs on the wall, the monitors displaying property portfolios, the professionalism of it all. This is really your company? Yes. For 26 years. Yes. And you never told us? No. He processed this, jaw working like Robert's did. Like mine did, actually, when I was trying to hold back words that wanted to explode. Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? Dad is a wreck. The firm is in chaos. Everyone's talking. Good. Let them talk. Maybe someone will finally say my name correctly. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. William leaned forward, hands clasped. Look, I get it. You're angry about the house. Dad handled that badly. But this, divorcing him, revealing some secret fortune, it's vindictive, it's cruel. Is it cruel to protect myself financially? Or is it only cruel when women do it without asking permission first? That's not fair. I'm trying to understand. No, you're trying to fix what you think is broken. Trying to restore the order you're comfortable with. But I'm not broken, William. I'm just finally visible. He sat back, frustration evident. Claire thinks you're having some kind of midlife crisis. That this is about feeling unappreciated, or Claire thinks I'm unstable because I'm acting in ways she can't control or predict. There's a difference between crisis and clarity. Then help me understand. If you had all this money, why stay with Dad? Why pretend to be what? The devoted wife? I wasn't pretending. I was being exactly that while also being something else. The problem is that you all only saw one part and assumed that was all there was. William's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, Claire, and silenced it. Dad wants to meet, talk this through. He's willing to negotiate. I don't need him to negotiate. I need him to accept that this marriage is over and move forward accordingly. What about, your family? You're still my family. That doesn't change because I'm divorcing your father. It feels like it changes everything. I stood, moved to the window overlooking the south end. Construction cranes dotted the skyline. New buildings rising, old ones being gutted and rebuilt. the city constantly reshaping itself. William, when you transferred the house to your name, what did you think would happen? Did you think I wouldn't notice? Wouldn't care? Dad said it was standard procedure. Did you ask me? Did anyone think to confirm that I agreed before making decisions about my home? Silence. That's what's changing. Not that I love you less, not that we're not family, just that I'm done accepting decisions made about my life without my input. That's all, just basic respect for my autonomy. William stood, paced the small office. This is going to destroy Dad's reputation, you know that, right? Once people find out what? That his success was built partly on unpaid work from his wife? That's not my shame, William, that's his. You're really going to go public with this? I'm going to be honest about my contributions. If that damages his reputation, maybe his reputation wasn't built on truth to begin with. He moved toward the door, stopped. Sophie says you're not doing this to punish us. I'm not. Then what are you doing? Standing up. After kneeling so long, I forgot what my full height felt like. The words landed between us. William's expression shifted, still confused, still angry, but something else underneath. Something that looked almost like recognition. He left without saying goodbye. I sat alone in my office and felt the weight of it. This wasn't triumph. This was just truth finally having space to exist. And truth was never as satisfying as people pretended. It was just necessary. My phone rang. Marcus. We have a settlement meeting scheduled for next week. Robert's attorneys want to propose terms. What kind of terms? The usual. He keeps the firm, the house, most liquid assets. You get a comfortable settlement, maybe 2 or 3 million. They're calling it generous. I laughed, couldn't help it. 2 million as generous compensation for 36 years. When I had 240 million, they didn't know I'd built. Tell them I'll attend, but I want to bring documentation showing Ashford Holdings' complete portfolio. You want to show them everything at once? I want to watch their faces when they realize I don't need their generous offer, because I'm already wealthier than Robert will ever be. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Eleanor, this is going to humiliate him publicly. He humiliated me privately for 36 years. The difference is I'm doing it in a conference room instead of at dinner parties and business meetings. Fair enough, I'll set it up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in my small apartment bed watching headlights sweep across the ceiling. Each one a small reminder that the world kept moving whether you were ready or not. My phone buzzed. Text from Sophie. William came home really quiet tonight. Won't talk about what you said, but Mom, I'm proud of you. Even if this is hard, maybe especially because it's hard. I typed back, thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. Her response? Claire called me crazy for supporting you. Said you're tearing the family apart. And what did you say? I said you held the family together for 36 years, and maybe it's someone else's turn to do the work. I set my phone down and let tears come. Not sad ones, just release. The pressure of holding everything together finally easing now that someone else saw the structure I'd been maintaining alone. The settlement meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to gather every document, every piece of evidence, every proof of the empire I'd built in silence. Diana and I spent those days reviewing everything, making copies, organizing presentations, building an undeniable case that I was not the dependent spouse seeking fair compensation, but an independent businesswoman who'd been subsidizing her husband's career without acknowledgement. The night before the meeting, Sophie came to Boston. We sat in my apartment drinking wine, looking at the city lights. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified, but not of them. I'm scared of what comes after. When the dust settles and I have to figure out who I am when I'm not defining myself in opposition to their expectations. You'll be you, just louder. Maybe that's what scares me. I've been quiet so long. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. Sophie leaned her head on my shoulder. Then learn. You learned how to build a company in secret. You can learn how to exist in public. We sat like that for a long time, mother and daughter, while the city hummed below and tomorrow waited with its revelations and consequences. At 9:45 Tuesday morning, I walked into the conference room of Marcus's law office, wearing the same navy blue suit I'd worn to William's law school graduation. Conservative, professional, forgettable. Except this time, I carried a briefcase containing documentation that would make me impossible to forget. Robert sat on one side of the long table, flanked by 2 attorneys. William sat beside him. Both of them looked tired, strained, like men who'd spent days trying to solve a problem that kept revealing new dimensions. They all stood when I entered. old-fashioned courtesy that felt hollow now. Marcus gestured to the chair beside him. I sat, set my briefcase on the table. Robert's lead attorney, a man named Harrison with silver hair and expensive cufflinks, cleared his throat. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for agreeing to meet. We believe we can reach an amicable settlement that's fair to everyone involved. I nodded, didn't speak. Harrison pulled out a folder. We're prepared to offer you the following: $3 million as a settlement payment, continued health insurance, the right to remain in the Connecticut home for up to 2 years while you transition. No. The single word stopped in mid-sentence. I'm sorry? No, I don't accept those terms. Harrison glanced at Robert, then back to me. Mrs. Morrison, with respect, $3 million is a very generous offer given the length of the marriage, and I don't need $3 million. I have $240 million. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first document. Ashford Property Holdings, LLC, Incorporation Papers. Slid them across the table. This is my company, established 26 years ago with funds from my inheritance. Current valuation just over $240 million. All assets separate from the marriage, all legally mine. Harrison picked up the papers. Read. His expression shifted from professional calm to visible shock. Robert leaned forward. Eleanor, you can't just... I pulled out the second document. Property deeds. These are the 12 buildings I own in the greater Boston area. Total value approximately $115 million. Several of these properties house major clients of Morrison & Associates, including the building your firm currently leases. The third document, client overlap analysis. This shows that 63% of your major clients conduct business in my buildings. Your firm's success is quite literally constructed on my foundation. You just never knew whose name was on the lease. Fourth document, my handwritten market analyses from the 1990s. These are research documents I prepared that form the basis of Morrison & Associates' expansion strategy. You presented them as your own work, built your professional reputation on insights I generated. I kept pulling documents, each one another piece of the invisible architecture I'd been building, each one another proof of existence they'd failed to acknowledge. The conference room had gone completely silent. Harrison set down the papers, removed his glasses. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to need a moment to consult with my client. But Robert wasn't looking at his attorney. He was staring at the documents spread across the table like accusations made tangible. You did all this while you were building your career on my unpaid consulting? Yes. William spoke for the first time. Mom, this is insane. How did we not know? Because you never asked. You assumed I spent my days shopping and having lunch and being decorative. It never occurred to you that I might be doing something you couldn't see. Marcus leaned forward. Gentlemen, I think it's clear that Mrs. Morrison doesn't need your settlement offer. What she needs is a clean divorce that acknowledges her separate property rights and her intellectual contributions to Mr. Morrison's career. Harrison was still reading documents. Mrs. Morrison, are you claiming intellectual property damages? I'm claiming recognition. Whether that comes with financial compensation is up to you. Robert finally found his voice. Eleanor, we can work this out. If you have your own money, if you're this successful, we don't need to divorce. We can be partners. We were never partners, Robert. I was support staff you got for free by marrying me. The words hit like physical blows. I saw him flinch, saw William look away. That's not fair. I loved you. You loved the version of me that made your life easier. The moment I became complicated, you wanted me managed. That's not love, that's convenience. I stood, gathered the documents back into my briefcase. Marcus has my terms. Clean divorce, 50-50 split of any genuinely marital assets, which amounts to very little since I've been financially separate for decades. No alimony either direction. And I want public acknowledgement of my contributions to Morrison & Associates' early success. Public acknowledgement? Robert's voice cracked slightly. A statement on the firm's website. Something simple. Special thanks to Eleanor Morrison for her invaluable consulting work during our founding years. That's all. Just truth in a place people can see it. Harrison started to object. Marcus cut him off. Those are extremely reasonable terms given what Mrs. Morrison could claim. I'd advise your client to accept. I moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. Robert, you wanted to know why I stayed all those years if I had my own money. I stayed because I hoped you'd eventually see me, really see me, not as wife or mother or hostess, but as a person with intelligence and capability and worth beyond what I could do for you. The room was silent. I finally realized you never would. Not because you're evil, just because you're comfortable. And comfortable people rarely look closely at the foundation supporting them. I left them sitting there with their expensive attorneys and their shattered assumptions and their slowly dawning understanding that the woman they dismissed had been the most powerful person in the room all along. Outside, October air bit sharp and clean. I walked 3 blocks before I let myself stop, lean against a building wall, and breathe. It was done. The revelation, the confrontation, the moment I'd been building toward without knowing it. My phone buzzed. Sophie, how did it go? I typed back, I showed them everything. And now they know. What comes next is up to them. I stood there on a Boston sidewalk while the city moved around me. People rushing to meetings, to lunches, to lives that mattered. For 36 years, I'd moved invisibly through similar crowds. Not anymore. They'd called me comfortable, predictable, content with my small domestic sphere. They'd been wrong about every single thing. And finally, they knew it. The week after the settlement meeting, I didn't hear from Robert. No calls, no texts, just silence that felt different from the silences we'd shared for 36 years. This one had weight, consequence, the heaviness of things said that couldn't be unsaid. William called once, brief, formal. Mom, Dad's attorney wants to finalize terms. Marcus should receive the papers by Friday. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else do you want me to say? A long pause. I could hear him breathing, that slight catch he'd had since childhood when trying not to cry. I don't know. Something that makes this feel less like we're losing you. You're not losing me, William. You're just meeting me for the first time. He hung up without responding. Sophie came to Boston that weekend. We walked along the Charles River, watching crew teams slice through water that reflected late October sky like hammered silver. She'd brought her daughters, my granddaughters, 8 and 6, who knew me as the grandmother who made good cookies but had never seen the office where I built empires. Emma asked why you and Grandpa Robert are getting divorced. Sophie's voice was careful. I told her sometimes grown-ups realize they want different things. What did she say? She said that's sad but okay because you seem happier now than at Christmas last year. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. The brutal honesty of children who hadn't yet learned to pretend comfort was the same as happiness. She's right. I'm happier. Even with everything being awful? I watched Emma chase pigeons while her younger sister collected fallen leaves. Awful and happy aren't opposites. I'm learning that. You can grieve something while also being relieved it's over. Sophie linked her arm through mine. Claire's been calling me. She wants to organize some kind of intervention. Get the family together to talk sense into you before you destroy everything Dad built. What did you tell her? I told her that Dad didn't build everything alone. That maybe if they'd paid attention, they would have noticed Mom building just as much. She hung up on me. We walked in silence for a while. The river beside us, the city behind us. Everything in motion while we stayed still. William's struggling, Sophie said finally. He keeps saying he doesn't know what's real anymore. Like if you could hide this for 26 years, what else don't we know about you? I didn't hide myself. I just didn't perform for an audience that wasn't watching. He doesn't understand the difference. I know, but that's his work to do, not mine. Emma ran back to us, breathless and grinning, holding a perfect red maple leaf. Grandma, look! It's the color of your building. She pointed across the river to where one of my properties stood, its brick facade catching afternoon sun. You told them? Sophie smiled. I told them their grandmother owns buildings, that she's a businesswoman, that she's been doing important work their whole lives. Emma thinks you're secretly a superhero. I knelt to take the leaf from Emma's small hand. Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful. Are you really rich, Grandma? Children. No filter, no pretense. Just questions asked with the certainty that adults would answer truthfully. Yes, I am. Cool. Can we get ice cream? You got cream? Sophie laughed, and for a moment the complexity dissolved into something simple. A grandmother buying ice cream for granddaughters who loved her whether she owned buildings or not. That night, alone in my apartment, I received an email. No sender name, just an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should know." I almost deleted it. Spam. Probably malicious. But something made me open it. Inside was a scanned document. Old, yellowed at the edges. A letter dated 1987, 2 years before I met Robert. The handwriting was my mother's. I recognized it immediately. That careful cursive she'd perfected in secretarial school. Dear Catherine, it began. My mother's sister, my aunt who died when I was 12. I need to tell someone the truth. and you're the only person I trust. Eleanor isn't Richard's biological daughter. She's David Morrison's, the man I had an affair with before Richard and I married. David was killed in a car accident before I could tell him I was pregnant. I married Richard 3 weeks later and let him believe she was his. He's never questioned it. Please don't tell Eleanor. She worships Richard and I can't bear to break her heart. But I needed someone to know in case, if anything happens to me, in case she ever needs to understand why Richard has always been distant with her. The word swam, reformed, swam again. David Morrison. Morrison. I read the letter 5 times. Each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less seismic. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Eleanor Morrison? A woman's voice. Professional, unfamiliar. Yes? My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm calling about a rather delicate matter. I received your contact information from a genealogy website. It appears we're related. The room tilted slightly. Related how? My late husband was David Morrison. He died in 1987. We'd been married 3 years. He was an only child, and his parents passed years ago. I've been doing family history research and, well, the DNA test flagged a close match. A daughter. You. I sat down hard on the couch. There must be a mistake. The test is quite accurate. And I found something else. Letters David saved from a woman named Margaret, your mother. They were involved, briefly, before he and I met. Patricia Morrison continued talking. Something about percentages and genetic markers and family trees. But I'd stopped processing words. David Morrison. The same last name I'd taken when I married Robert. Robert Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, are you still there? Robert Morrison, my husband. Did he know David Morrison? Know him? David was his uncle, his father's younger brother. They weren't close, but yes, they knew each other. The implications cascaded. Robert had married his uncle's daughter, his cousin, without knowing, without either of us knowing. I'm sorry to drop this on you, Patricia continued, but I thought you should know. For medical history, if nothing else, David had a heart condition, hereditary. You should be tested. We talked for another 10 minutes. Logistics, history, the strange genealogy of secrets kept and accidentally revealed. When I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, trying to understand what this meant. My whole life had been built on a lie I didn't know existed. Richard, the man I'd called Dad, wasn't my father. Had never been my father, and somehow, without knowing, I'd married into my biological father's family. The universe had a sense of humor so dark it bordered on cruelty. I called Marcus. I need you to add something to the divorce filing. A DNA test. I need to confirm I'm not biologically related to Robert. Eleanor, what? Just trust me, can you do it? Of course, but this is going to raise questions. Let it raise questions. I'm done hiding from complicated truths. The DNA test took 3 days. The results came back on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a meeting with potential investors for a new property development in Providence. Diana handed me the envelope during a break. I opened it in the bathroom, standing under fluorescent lights that made everything look clinical and harsh. 99.9% probability of first cousin relationship. Robert was my first cousin. I'd spent 36 years married to family I didn't know I had. The bathroom door opened. Diana took one look at my face and ushered the other woman out. What happened? I handed her the paper. She read, looked up, read again. Oh my God. I need to tell him. Before this becomes part of the legal record. Before his attorneys see it and... Eleanor, you don't owe him anything. He's been horrible to you. I owe myself the dignity of handling this directly. That's different. I called Robert from my office. He answered on the 4th ring. Eleanor, I wasn't expecting... We need to meet. Today. It's important. I'm not discussing the divorce terms. My attorney. This isn't about the divorce. It's about something else. Something you need to know privately before it becomes public. Silence. Then where? The public garden. In an hour. I hung up before he could argue. The public garden in late October was almost empty. Too cold for tourists. Too late in the season for the swan boats. Just the permanent residents, the ducks, the old men feeding them, the occasional jogger cutting through on their way somewhere warmer. Robert stood by the lagoon, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders hunched against wind that hadn't existed in summer when this garden had been full of people who believed in happy endings. I walked toward him carrying an envelope. This better be important. I have a meeting. We're cousins. He stared at me. What? Your uncle David Morrison. He had an affair with my mother before she married Richard. He was my biological father. I just found out last week. I handed him the envelope. He opened it with shaking hands, read the DNA results. Read them again. This can't be. It's accurate. We're first cousins. We've been first cousins our entire marriage. Robert sat heavily on a bench. All the color had drained from his face. How long have you known? 1 week. A genealogy researcher contacted me, then I confirmed it. Does this mean is the marriage even legal? In Massachusetts, first cousins can marry. We didn't know, so there's no fraud. But it changes things. At least it changes how I understand our history. Robert looked at the paper again, as if it might have transformed into something less impossible. My Uncle David, the one who died in that car crash. Yes, Mom mentioned him sometimes, said he was the smart one, the one who should have run the family business instead of my father. We sat in silence, two people who'd shared 36 years and apparently shared blood we'd never known existed. This is insane, Robert finally said. All of it, the divorce, the money, and now this. I know. Eleanor, I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just thought you should know before the divorce becomes final, before this information gets filed in public records. He turned to look at me, really look at me, maybe for the first time in years. Did you love me, ever, or was it all just strategy? The question surprised me with its vulnerability. I loved you, desperately, for at least the first 10 years, maybe 15. Then I loved the idea of you. Then I loved the life we were supposed to have. By the end, I was just going through motions because I didn't know how to do anything else. When did you stop? I don't know. It wasn't a moment. It was erosion. 1,000 small dismissals that wore away foundation until there was nothing left to build on. Robert put his head in his hands. I wasn't a good husband. No, you weren't. I could be better. Now that I know, now that I see you, I could try again. Robert, no, that's not why I told you this. Then why? Because even though you hurt me, even though our marriage was broken long before I admitted it, I don't want you to learn this from a court document. You deserve to hear it from me. That's all. Just basic human decency. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. You're a better person than I am. I'm just a person who's tired of letting anger make my decisions. We sat together for a few more minutes. Two cousins who'd built a life on foundations, neither understood. Then I stood. Marcus will have the final divorce papers ready next week. Please sign them. Let's end this with dignity instead of continuing to hurt each other. Eleanor, wait. I turned back. I'm sorry for all of it, for not seeing you, for not appreciating what you were building, for being so comfortable in my assumptions that I never questioned them. The apology hung between us, imperfect, late, but real. Thank you, that means something. Does it change anything? No, but it gives us both permission to move forward without bitterness. I left him sitting by the lagoon, alone with revelations he'd have to process the same way I had, in private, in pieces, in whatever way made survival possible. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Clean, simple, exactly as I'd wanted. Robert kept Morrison and Associates in the Connecticut house. I kept Ashford Holdings and everything I'd built. We divided the minimal shared assets, a vacation home neither of us wanted, some joint investments, and walked away from 36 years as if they'd been a business partnership that ran its course. The morning after the papers were signed, William appeared at my Boston office. He'd lost weight. His suit hung looser than it should have. The confidence he usually wore like armor had been stripped away, leaving someone younger and more uncertain. Can we talk? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, hands clasped, that nervous gesture he'd had as a boy. Mom, I've been an ass. Yes. I mean really, comprehensively for years. Yes. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You're not going to make this easy, are you? Why should I? You didn't make the last 35 years easy for me. William nodded, accepting that. Claire left me, filed for divorce last week. Said I'm exactly like Dad, treating women as accessories to my success instead of people with their own. Is she right? Yeah, she is. I learned from the best, didn't I? Watched Dad dismiss you for decades and thought that's how marriage worked. I waited. Sometimes silence was the only gift worth giving. I've been seeing a therapist. She asked me to describe you. All I could come up with was my mom. Not your name, not your interests, not anything about who you actually are. Just your role in relation to me. And I realized I'm 35 years old and I don't know my own mother. I know the woman who made dinner and organized Christmas and showed up to my soccer games, but I don't know Eleanor, the person who built a company while I was sleeping, who's smarter than anyone I've ever met, who survived being invisible for decades and came out stronger. Tears ran down his face. He didn't wipe them away. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I treated you like furniture, useful, expected, not worth noticing until you were gone. I came around the desk, pulled another chair close to his, sat. William, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing not to let it poison the future. What does that mean for us? It means we start over, not as mother and son with all that history and assumption, but as two people trying to build something honest. Can we do that? I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. He nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. Will you tell me about it, about how you built all this? I want to understand. So I told him. Started with the inheritance from my grandmother, explained the first property purchase, walked him through 26 years of patient accumulation. He listened without interrupting, his expression shifting between amazement and shame. When I finished, he sat back. You're incredible, Mom. Like, genuinely. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because telling you would have made it vulnerable. And I needed something that was just mine, something no one could take or diminish or explain away. Dad must be destroyed. Your father is processing, same as all of us. Are you okay after everything? The question surprised me with its genuine concern. I'm better than okay. For the first time in decades, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. William left an hour later. We didn't hug, didn't make promises about weekly dinners or forced family togetherness. Just agreed to have coffee the following week. To start small, to build something real instead of performing something comfortable. 2 months after the divorce, I launched the Silent Builders Foundation. $10 million in initial funding. Scholarships and business grants for women over 50 starting new careers or businesses after divorce or widowhood. The press release went out on a Tuesday. By Friday, I'd received over 3,000 applications. The stories were heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Women who'd spent decades supporting other people's dreams and were finally ready to pursue their own. Women who'd been dismissed as too old, too late, too comfortable to change. Women who'd been building in silence and just needed someone to see them. Diana helped me sort applications. Sophie joined the board. Even William asked if he could contribute. Pro bono legal services for women navigating divorce. Grace Wellington, the 70-year-old investor who'd been my silent partner for years, hosted a fundraising gala. 500 people. Tickets at $10,000 each. By the end of the night, we'd raised $12 million additional dollars. I stood at the podium in a ballroom that sparkled with chandeliers and champagne, looking out at faces that had come to celebrate something they understood. The power of being underestimated and the triumph of proving everyone wrong. My name is Eleanor Catherine Ashford Morrison, I began. Most of you know me as the woman who secretly built a $240 million real estate empire while everyone thought she was just a housewife. Polite laughter. But that's not the full story. The full story is that I spent 36 years being told I was invisible, being treated like my contributions didn't matter because they didn't come with titles or public recognition. I internalized that invisibility, made it my strategy, built power in spaces no one was watching. I paused, letting the words settle. But invisibility is exhausting, and it's lonely, and it teaches you that safety comes from silence, which is the cruelest lesson of all. The room had gone quiet. The Silent Builders Foundation exists to tell a different story. That visibility matters, that recognition matters, that women's work, especially the work we do in private, the strategies we build in silence, the empires we create while everyone assumes we're doing nothing important, deserves to be seen and celebrated and compensated. I looked out at the crowd, saw Sophie in the third row crying, saw Diana in the back grinning, saw William standing by the bar, looking at me like he was seeing someone new. So here's my challenge to everyone in this room. Look around, really look, at the women you work with, the women in your families, the women you've dismissed as just mothers or just wives or just administrative support. Ask yourself what you might be missing. What empires are being built in your blind spots? What brilliance you failed to recognize because it didn't demand your attention? I picked up the glass of water beside the podium, and to the women who are building in silence, who are here tonight because someone finally saw you, or because you finally demanded to be seen, I want you to know, it's never too late. It's never too late to reclaim yourself. It's never too late to be visible. It's never too late to stop asking permission to exist at your full capacity. The applause started slow, then built. People standing, faces I didn't know reflecting something back at me that looked like recognition, like relief, like the collective exhale of everyone who'd ever been dismissed and had chosen to build anyway. After the gala, I went home to my Boston apartment. Small, simple, mine. On my desk sat a letter that had arrived that morning. Handwritten envelope, return address in Montana. I opened it carefully. Dear Eleanor, it read, I'm sure you don't remember me. My name is Catherine Hayes, your father, Robert's aunt. I've been following your story in the news, and I needed to reach out. I want you to know that David Morrison, your biological father, was a remarkable man. Kind, brilliant. He would have been so proud of what you've built. I wish he'd lived to know you. I wish you'd had the chance to know him. But I want you to understand that everything strong and resilient in you, that came from him. Your mother Margaret was my friend. She made mistakes, but she loved you fiercely. They both did, in their ways. I hope knowing this brings you some peace. You were never unwanted. You were just caught in the complicated aftermath of love that couldn't survive its circumstances. With deep respect and admiration, Catherine. I read the letter 3 times, each time finding new meaning in the spaces between words. David Morrison, the father I'd never known, the uncle to the man I'd married, the origin point of everything I'd become without knowing his name. The universe really did have a dark sense of humor, but also maybe a sense of justice, because without knowing it, I'd carried his name, built my empire as a Morrison, claimed the identity that was mine by blood even when I thought it was mine only by marriage. I picked up my phone and texted Sophie. I love you. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Her response came immediately. I love you too, Mom. Always have. Now I just get to know who I'm loving. That night, I dreamed about buildings. Not the ones I owned, but the ones I'd build next. Structures that hadn't been imagined yet. Spaces designed for women who needed room to expand. When I woke, morning light was streaming through my windows, and I had 17 new emails from women applying for Silent Builders grants. Each one started the same way. I've been building in silence for years. I spent the morning reading their stories. Women who'd started businesses in spare bedrooms, who'd earned degrees online while everyone slept, who'd saved money in secret accounts because they'd learned that financial independence was the only real safety. Each story was different. Each story was mine. By noon, I'd approved 12 grants. By evening, I'd scheduled mentorship calls with 8 women who reminded me of myself at 32, standing at the beginning of something they couldn't yet name, but knew they needed to build. 6 months after the divorce, Robert called. Eleanor, I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. His voice was different, softer, less certain. It's fine. How are you? I'm managing. The firm is stable. William's been helping more. We're figuring things out. That's good. I wanted you to know that I put up the acknowledgement on the Morrison & Associates website, thanking you for your consulting work during the founding years. Thank you. It's the truth. I should have acknowledged it decades ago. We were quiet for a moment, just breathing, existing on opposite ends of a phone line that no longer connected us legally, but still carried the weight of shared history. Catherine Hayes sent me a letter too, Robert said, about my Uncle David, about you. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? All these years and we never knew. Strange doesn't quite cover it. Eleanor, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but are you happy? The question settled between us. Genuine, vulnerable. Yes, I think I am. Are you? Not yet, but I'm learning. Therapy helps. Understanding what I lost helps more. Robert, you didn't lose me. You never really had me, not the way you thought you did. But maybe we can have something honest now. Not marriage, not even friendship. Just 2 people who understand each other better than we did. I'd like that. We talked for a few more minutes. Small things. Sophie's daughters, William's progress, the weather. Normal conversation between 2 people who'd once been married and were now just humans trying to navigate the aftermath. When I hung up, I felt lighter. Not because of reconciliation or closure or any of the neat psychological packages people use to explain complicated feelings. Just lighter because honesty, even painful honesty, weighs less than pretense. 1 year after the divorce, The Silent Builders Foundation had funded 203 women. 12 had started businesses that were already profitable. 47 were in school. The rest were in various stages of rebuilding lives they'd set aside for decades. I hired 3 of them to work at Ashford Holdings. Women in their 50s and 60s who'd been told they were too old to start new careers, who proved in 6 months that experience and determination beat youth and confidence every single time. On the anniversary of signing my divorce papers, Sophie organized a small celebration. Just her daughters, Diana, Marcus, and William. We gathered in my Boston office. Diana had ordered cake. Marcus brought champagne. William stood awkwardly by the window, still learning how to be present without trying to fix things. Sophie raised her glass. To Mom, who taught us that silence isn't absence, that patience isn't weakness, that building in private doesn't make your work less real. Emma, now 9, added, "And who's a superhero?" Everyone laughed. I felt tears threatening and let them come. Thank you, all of you, for seeing me, for standing with me, for letting me be complicated and imperfect and real. We drank champagne, ate cake, watched the sun set over Boston through windows of a building I owned, surrounded by people who knew my name. All of it, not just the parts that were convenient. Later, after everyone left, I stood alone in my office, looking at the photograph of 22-year-old Eleanor, the girl with the too big blazer and the uncertain smile. We did it, I whispered to her. We built something they couldn't diminish. We became visible without asking permission. My phone buzzed. Email notification. Another Silent Builders application. My name is Janet. I'm 61 years old. I spent 40 years being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's support system. 6 months ago, my husband left me for someone younger. Everyone expects me to be broken, but I'm not broken. I'm just finally free. I've been taking courses in digital marketing at night, building a consulting business during the day, working towards something that's mine. I don't need much, just someone to see me, just recognition that starting over at 61 isn't failure. It's courage. I read the application twice. Then I opened a new email and typed, "Application approved. Let's talk this week about your business plan." You're not starting over. You're starting out. There's a difference. And yes, it takes extraordinary courage. Welcome to visibility. I hit send and felt something settle. Not closure, not completion, just the quiet satisfaction of building something larger than myself, of turning my private architecture into public infrastructure, of making sure other women didn't have to build in silence unless they chose to. Outside my window, Boston hummed with evening traffic, lights coming on in buildings I owned and buildings I didn't, people heading home or heading out, living lives I'd never know. But somewhere in that vast network of human existence, there were women reading my story, women learning that invisibility could be strategy but didn't have to be permanent, women discovering that the empire you build in secret is still an empire. I thought about Robert, about William, about Claire, and the intervention that never happened, because no one could quite explain what I needed to be rescued from. I thought about David Morrison, the father I'd never met but whose name I'd carried without knowing its weight. I thought about the girl I'd been at 22, so certain that intelligence and hard work would be enough, so naive about the ways the world would try to make her smaller. And I thought about the woman I'd become, 59 years old, wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined, visible in ways that still felt uncomfortable but necessary. They'd called me the woman who kept house. They'd been wrong about every single thing. And finally, the record had been corrected. Not with anger, not with revenge, just with truth spoken clearly enough that no one could pretend they hadn't heard. I turned off the lights in my office and headed home. Tomorrow there would be more applications, more women building in silence who needed someone to see them, more work to do. But tonight, I let myself rest in the knowledge that I'd done what I set out to do 3 decades ago when I bought that first duplex in Springfield. I'd built something no one could take away. I'd reclaimed my name. I'd proven that it's never too late to be seen. And that finally completely was enough.